I think that thing sensed me. Despite the distance, it turned, stared, and ran toward me. I swear it's just as you described. The tender smile, black teeth. It was right outside the window looking in. With the same gesture that you wrote in your story. Very good evening, community. I thank you very much for being here again in the space where we have prepared, as always, some of the most shocking stories that have reached us. This is one of those strong episodes that perhaps, unlike the previous one for example, contains very hard to believe stories, experiences that probably seem impossible to some. But remember that we are as skeptical as our own experiences allow. So I wish you that if you have never experienced a paranormal event, that you can always continue like this, that you can continue with this healthy skepticism, that stories like the ones we are going to hear below always seem distant, almost impossible. But if not, if at some point they have their own experience, they already know. Here we are going to listen to it. We'll be waiting for you with open arms. If at some point they become protagonists of stories of the night. We started in 5432. My name is George. Hello. I never thought one of your stories would ever touch me like this. I have several anecdotes of paranormal encounters, but the truth is, I have always controlled my emotions regarding that. However, it is the story of the woman who said she was an angel at the gas station, the lady who seemed to be wearing a human skin suit and ran weird, I think, having seen her at a very early age, when she was almost 5 or 6 years old, and I think maybe that's why I didn't consciously remember her. I remember one of those nights when I liked to sleep in the window of my house. Yes, in the window there was a grill that floated outside the house where I placed some blankets and a pillow and I liked to sleep. There's some nights, one of those early mornings, I saw something running in the same strange way that you narrated, with the same dirt and with loose skin, as if it were not your own. Already asleep, something almost instinctively he woke me up and I managed to see that thing running, passing in front of my house. I half sat up to see what it was, and that was my mistake. I think that thing heard me. He felt me because despite the distance he turned to see me and ran back in my direction. I threw myself from the window to the ground, but childish curiosity made me look for a small handheld mirror and place it in such a way that I could see towards the street. I swear to you, I swear to them that I saw exactly the same thing that you narrated. The tender smile, but with black teeth. That thing was looking directly at the window where I was, with the same gesture you wrote in your story. I don't live in that place anymore. I moved out of that place many years ago. Honestly, it's a very rural town, but quiet. The strange thing is that I was just walking towards where I live, now listening to your story, when I almost lost my balance. The moment that lost memory returned to my mind, my legs were shaking and I had to sit for a moment to regain my courage. Just remembering that look broke me, and you put it on. Very definitely my head back. The weirdest thing of all is that I am not from Mexico, I am from Venezuela, but I can swear to you that is exactly the same thing I saw. Hello community. What I'm about to tell you is confusing even to me. I still can't quite understand it, and although time has passed, I still find it difficult to process it. I ask you please that this story remain anonymous. The names, places, and details are not accurate, and for my safety I prefer to keep it that way. Once you know history you will understand, because to begin with, I must tell you about my sister Sophia, my twin. We were identical, so much so that we often had fun confusing our friends, teachers, and even our own mother at times. We were always close until we entered high school. Sophia, with her extroverted character, was never alone, always surrounded by friends, suitors, and attentions. I, on the other hand, was the opposite. Shy, reserved, and barely with a couple of friends. While she stood out and shone as one of the most beloved and popular students, I was rather invisible. Object of mockery and constant bullying, over time the relationship between us began to crack. Perhaps the deepest crack opened the day I discovered Sophia reading my diary, my secret diary, the one where I confessed my insecurities and above all my love for a boy from popular school 1. Shortly after her she started a relationship with him. It wasn't the courtship that hurt me, but the betrayal that he did, knowing how I felt, almost as if he had deliberately wanted to hurt me. I tell you this so that you understand that our union was already fractured, and that Sophia was beginning to become someone different. It was in my senior year of high school that I noticed the most disturbing changes. Sophia began to interact with older people, not adults, but children who seemed to be already going to university, foreign to our school environment. It was not unusual to see her go out with them, inventing excuses for mom, teamwork, going to the movies, excuses that my mother didn't question. Because being a single mother she had to work all day, and that made it difficult for her to know what was happening with us. Neither do I never told him. I already had enough problems with my twin, and there was one more worm. Besides, I suppose that maybe he was just partying with them, that in his rebellion he had older friends. At school she was still the cheerful and popular girl, but at home she became increasingly distant and secretive. One afternoon, returning from a friend's house, I heard my mother arguing hotly with Sophia. I went upstairs, and what I saw scared me. On the floor was a board, Ouija board, black candles, salt scattered, a book that looked like an occult book, and other objects that I didn't recognize. They were things Mom had found hidden in her closet. I confronted her very angrily, demanding an explanation. Sophia, with a look of hatred that I will never forget, responded in a firm voice that she was the element. Yes, that's what he said, looking at her with contempt. You'll never understand. I am the element. And after he said that, he pointed at me, and in a strange voice, deeper than usual, he added, I am the element, but she is the one who binds me here. If it didn't exist anymore, everything would be different. My mom, bewildered, reacted in the only way she could. He slapped her and shouted that she was grounded for a long time. I questioned myself because my mother didn't say anything else. Why didn't he ask Sophia what she meant and just forbid her to go out with friends? He took away all her permits and ordered her that from that day on he wanted to see her at home immediately after school. Far from improving the situation, what only seemed to worsen it, Sophia's attitude became even more disturbing. More and more reserved, more distant, she looked down at me. She addressed me with mockery or sarcasm that she would say as if I had done something to provoke her at school. Meanwhile, Sophia continued to meet these older and unknown people. Sometimes she would slip away in the middle of classes to go with them and come back just in time to leave, as if she knew she had to be very careful in case Mom came looking for her. That was how the rest of high school passed. Sophia grew further and further away, not only from me but also from our mother. The few times she spoke to me, she did so sarcastically and was usually very rude. Most of the time he just ignored me. When it came time to choose a university, he announced to the family that he would go to study in another state on a full scholarship. She said she had applied on her own, that she didn't want to share it with us, and that they had accepted her. He gave it to my mother in an official letter signed, sealed by the institution, and with that, a month later he left home. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hurt by her departure, because, although she sometimes seemed to hate me, I still saw her as what had always been my reflection, my half. A part of my soul didn't understand how it could be so simple for him to erase me from his life, to treat me as if I were the plague. I, on the other hand, stayed in our city and entered a public university to study veterinary medicine. I had always been fascinated by animals, and when I saw that I had been accepted, I felt immensely happy. It was a childhood dream, one that I once shared with Sophia, but that has now come true. It weighed on me like a sad memory after Sophia left. Contact with her practically disappeared. Sometimes I would call my mom and talk to her, and I knew about her through what my mom told me, but nothing more. Something that also happened was that as a result of her departure, I began to have dreams, where I saw Sophia standing in the middle of a clearing in a transparent dress. He sank with his fists clenched against the floor, full of symbols, and muttered words that I did not understand, that I could barely hear the dream. It was strange, because when I saw that image I knew that it wasn't me, that it was Sophia, that I was rather a kind of spectator. I always woke up when suddenly she would get up and run towards me with her eyes completely white. It was a terrible image that always caused me great fear, that made me wake up screaming over time. My dreams about Sophia became very recurring. She was always the same in the middle of the clearing, surrounded by symbols drawn in the earth with something dark, stuck, muttering words in a language I didn't understand. Over time I understood, and don't ask me how. That it wasn't that I was dreaming about her, but that I was seeing what she was doing elsewhere. It was as if an invisible window was letting me peek, or worse, as if she was forcing me to witness it. It was something like a split that she imposed on me from the one who forced me. So a few more months passed while I didn't sleep well because of nightmares, the university, and some other things, like the recent breakup with an emotional and physical hate. I felt very tired, exhausted. Since Sophia left, I had lost a lot of weight. I was constantly depressed, anxious, and the recent events didn't help at all. And here, community is where for me the real nightmare began. I remember the day of the accident well. He had left the university quite late. It was raining and the avenue was empty. I remember listening to a very popular song at that time when suddenly there was interference in the music. A voice that was faint at first but then became evident, very evident, a distorted voice, apparently male, saying my name in the middle of the song. She stood on the sidewalk staring directly at me. It was only a moment, a fleeting second as my car passed, but I knew it was her. Could I have mistaken her? My mind doubted as I caught a fleeting glimpse once more on another sidewalk. Would you recognize her anywhere? I was nervous, thinking that perhaps it had been a trap of my mind. When suddenly, later, there she is again, standing on the sidewalk, Only seeing me again, I passed her again. Although this time I decided to brake suddenly and put the car in reverse. That was my mistake in my eagerness to go back and see that it was her, and not a vision. I didn't notice that when I braked just at the intersection of an avenue. The last thing I remember is the sound of the horn of a truck that hit me, and at that moment everything was black, silent, and I was mumbling. I don't remember much else. For quite some time I fell into a coma. Yes, community. I was in a coma for over a month. But it was neither rest nor emptiness. I remember I was trapped in a place where time did not exist, where there were shadows surrounding me, and where that same male voice repeated my name. Within the time I was in a coma, I continued to have visions, where I watched my twin preside over rituals, raising knives, begged of black candles and chants. I was always in the motionless center, as if my own body had been surrendered. I felt like I was turning off, as if life was slipping away little by little. Sometimes the scene would change and I would see my twin in a kind of church, in a black dress on her knees, praying to figures who were not saints, figures who had big misshapen horns. While I felt something pulling at me from inside as if they wanted to rip my soul out, pulling. And there in those shadows, in all the visions he had, he could hear her. "You are the price, you're my offering. You are the price, you're my offering." Then I learned that the doctors had already given up hope on me. My mother, desperate, looked for specialists, studies, alternative treatments. Nothing offered her an answer, though she was never a strictly religious woman. At that time he clung to the hospital chapel, spent hours there praying, crying, asking God why he had to go through that. He confessed to me that he was asking not only for me but also for Sophia, who never came to see me. Accompany her despite her pleas. That abandonment also tore them apart, one daughter absent and the other dying. It was on one of those visits when something strange happened. The chapel was utterly silent, not uncomfortable but reassuring. My mother was crying in the back row when she heard footsteps. They were not firm, but slow, difficult. He felt like someone who seemed to have always been in that chapel. Next to him sat an unknown woman, of the most ordinary appearance but with a special intense look, and a very low voice. He told her, "Your daughter's not sick." Someone very close to her turned her in. "There's a bond that holds her here." But not for long. My mother should have been scared, but she wasn't. Something inside her, a certainty that touch couldn't explain. He had to trust that this meeting was no accident, that if he wanted to see me wake up he had to pay attention, obey. The woman handed him a small amulet, a dark cloth bag filled with dried herbs, a red thread. And something that looked like bone dust. He told him to put it under my pillow and wait. That night, the unknown woman arrived at the hospital without anyone stopping her. He entered as if he were part of my family, closed the door to my room securely and deployed what to anyone would have seemed like heresy, but which my mother witnessed with great expectation and faith. He lit 3 candles in the corners, drew a circle of salt and ash around my bed and placed a bowl of water on the floor, into which he soon dropped a few drops of his own blood. She began to murmur, words that Mama does not remember, because she prayed silently holding a rosary, although she trembled, although something in the atmosphere seemed strange to her. Something within that room seemed to whisper that this ritual wasn't darkness, but the sole way to save me. My dreams reflected it. Something shifted my nightmares, as though an unseen, fierce wind blew away the evil suffocating me. The male voice calling my name grew fainter, breaking apart, accompanied by a buzzing in my ears and a searing pain in my chest. It was as if my heart remembered its purpose, beating once more. I saw Sophia on her knees before me, her eyes filled with fury, her mouth twisted in a scream as her hands clawed toward me. The dark essence surrounding me began to dissipate like wisps of smoke. That was the final time I saw my twin, her face consumed with hatred. A rage that wasn't human. I felt a violent tug in my stomach as if an invisible cord were breaking inside me. My body was heavy, but at the same time a warm force that did not come from me was pushing me upward. It forced me to let go of what was holding me back. I remember Sophia shouting my name one last time, a scream that was soon drowned. Suddenly air struck my lungs like a hammer. Pain racked me, cold seeping into my bones, my body weighed down by reality. Time became meaningless, but after that ritual my eyes eventually opened. The doctors deemed it miraculous. Later my mother confessed the ritual's dark purpose. Someone tried to offer me as a sacrifice to a deity. Although I couldn't sense it at the time. Clarity came later. I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to believe that Sophia was capable of such a thing. My sister, my other half. Days passed when we didn't hear from her. His calls had stopped weeks ago. His messages were already gone. My mother, fearing the worst, decided to go looking for her. She tells me that when she opened the door to her apartment, a horrible stench hit her immediately. She ventured deeper, reaching the room, only to confront her worst nightmare. Sophia's lifeless body sprawled on the floor. With his face pale and an expression that my mother describes as painful, the position of his body, with his arms extended and his hands open towards the ceiling upward, and the environment was also very scary. The walls were covered with strange symbols, painted red on the table and candles on the floor. Many black and red candles burned almost to the ground, figures carved in wood, figures with empty eyes, others with distorted shapes, open books with illegible writing, amulets hanging from furniture, including chains and small fragments of bones. The whole environment was loaded, very heavy. According to the authorities, it was a suicide. They found no signs of external violence or evidence of another person, and among his belongings they found something that left us astonished and that added more pain to the situation. Sophia never went to college like she told us. Among his papers, his notes and strange journals, they found all their belonging, a cult, the rituals. The promises I'd made, and the most heartbreaking thing I'd been offered as part of a pact. Each line confirmed what my nightmares had hinted at for months. The accident, my coma, it had all been part of a plan, part of something already written down. That day I realized with absolute terror that I had not only lost my sister, we had also found out who he was capable of. Sophia wasn't just my reflection. My twin was someone who had given her own blood, her own family, to forces she could not understand or stand up to. And although I, thank God, am living in his shadow, what remains of that dark pact still floats near me. I can still feel it. The day of his burial was very cold, even though it was the middle of summer. The day of his burial was very cold, even though it was the middle of summer. The truth, community, is that despite the pain we were going through as a family, I still had many doubts. I still wanted to know. And the doubts were resolved days later. One day while we were talking in the kitchen, someone knocked on the door. She was the same lady who had guided my mother during my bed. My mother was happy to see her. She wanted me to meet her. She invited her to inevitably pass the topic of Sophia. Mrs. the Witch, Good Witch, or I don't know what to call her, came into the conversation, and she stared at me with her dark, penetrating eyes. And with a firm voice he told me, "Your sister Sophia was the one who should give you as an offering." Everything was planned, the rituals, the symbols of the accident. Everything was to seal the pact, but something prevented the payment from being made. The inheritance with which she made the pact does not tolerate delays or excuses, which is why she paid in your place. Sophia is no longer alive. Why did the entity claim it? You survive because you're born with life and your strength blocks sacrifice, nothing more. It wasn't the ritual I did. That just helped that you could come back, but that strength has always been in you since then, community. Sometimes I feel Sophia here with me very close. It's like understanding what he did. She was more present, is not always here, and it's less and less, but when it happens I feel a very strange cold. It scares me a lot. Sometimes when I pass in front of a mirror, I think I see a twinkle in my eyes that I didn't. I feel like sometimes it's her watching me through them. On the dreary nights when I lie down and close my eyes, I return to the clear. Lavicada, fumbling words or sentences that I don't understand with my fists against the ground, and for a moment I feel that there is no distance between us, that we are one and the same. Sometimes the smell of burning herbs invades my room, or I hear a barely audible whisper saying my name. Like all twins, my sister and I are and will be united forever. I know I'll see her again, and that terrifies me. Thank you for coming this far, and since you continue listening, it's time to remind yourself that you should be subscribed to this space. If you're coming to this part of the episode, you should without a doubt. Becoming part of this community is totally free. Subscribing helps us a lot, and you will never miss an episode of Tales of the Night again. In the description we are also going to leave you all the necessary links in case you want to visit our page. Send us your story, follow our social networks, or buy any of the books that are still left. Thank you for having exhausted them everywhere. We never thought of reaching more than 50,000 books sold. The truth is, if you find one, buy it, and if there is no longer one, then look who can you borrow it from, and please leave us your opinion. We continue with one more story tonight. Good night, Uriel. Good night, community. I hope you are well. I don't know if you are going to believe the following, or you are driving me crazy, or you think I am making it up. But I'm going to tell them anyway, especially so that other young people don't make the mistake I made. I tell you, I live in Jalisco. My name is Andres, and when I was 15 years old, I was a very skeptical young man. He didn't believe in anything paranormal, not in ghosts or apparitions, much less in that the Ouija games were a way of communicating with the afterlife. But then my friends, my best friends, Mark and Juan, both my age, They were very believers in all that and were always telling stories. They said that we had to investigate places and that one day we would find a hidden person or have a contact, and that way we would become the most famous paranormal investigators in Mexico. I, as always in everything, followed the flow so as not to make him feel bad. But inside I thought I was wasting my time. Anyway, one night, Juan arrived at the place where we were meeting and showed us something he had achieved. It was a Ouija board. I confess that when I saw it, I felt a very strange chill, but I tried not to give it more importance than it had. As I mentioned, I didn't believe in that. Juan insisted that we should play it, but in a place where there were real spirits. At that time he wouldn't tell us what place it would be. He just said that we should get some vigils in Jalisco, specifically in Guadalajara. There is a market where they sell everything related to the occult, worship of the Holy Death, reading letters, etc. What better place to get candles, don't you? Sure, we could buy them at any store, but we wanted it to be something closer to the paranormal, according to our thinking. The next day, very early, Marcos and I went to said market to buy them. That's where the first strange thing in this story happened. At the time of entering, an elderly lady who was begging for alms at the entrance. When we passed her and gave her a coin, she told me, "Don't play with those things. Don't play with what you don't know. You may regret the chill I felt when I saw the return table." But my only thought was, old, crazy. I turned around to catch up with Marcos. We bought the evening candles, and when we left the market I no longer saw the lady. The afternoon arrived. We waited for Juan, who arrived on time and told us that we were going to go to the Pantheon in Mezquitan. I immediately replied, "Are you crazy about the mosque Pantheon? Are you really crazy?" And he, quickly, in a mocking voice, did not answer me shortly. "Are you afraid that you do not believe in any of this? It doesn't matter where we go, right? Well, let's go," I thought. What could be different than playing it in a pantheon? Yes, in reality the paranormal does not exist. We arrive at that pantheon, a place that commands respect during the day, but at night... At night it is another world. The high walls, roofs, vines, the sculptures of angels and virgins with faces worn by time. Everything contributed to an atmosphere of mystery and melancholy. It should be noted that the Pantheon was still open. We went in and wandered among the graves, reading names and dates etched on the tombstones. It was like time travel. Imagining the lives of those people who rested underground. Suddenly we noticed that the sun was beginning to set, and that the employees of the Pantheon were preparing to close. We hid behind some big mausoleums, so that the security guard wouldn't see us and take us out. We waited for more than half an hour, just listening to the echo of our own hearts, and the night sounds of the city that crept in from afar until night fell. Only the faint light of the main road was visible. Of course I felt a little afraid, I must confess, but I was not going to give rise to Juan and Marco making fun of me. Not again. People always make fun of skeptics at the slightest sign of fear. You noticed it as if they had no right to feel it. We went to a very old grave, one of those that seem abandoned by his relatives. The tombstone was covered with moss and lichen, and the rusted iron cross was tilted to one side, ready to fall. There Juan lit the candlesticks, creating a flickering circle of light around them. The aroma will be burned. It mixed with the smell of damp earth, withered flowers with the smell of Pantheon. We placed the board on the grave, careful not to move the dried flowers that adorned it. Did he ask the three of us to take the needle, feeling the cold of the metal in our fingers, and he simply indicated to say hello? I don't remember the ritual well and how good it was, but I do remember that I asked the question, is there someone in this place with whom we can talk, who wants to tell us something? The first time nothing happened, I laughed and even told them, see? Nothing more. Do we come here to waste time? I told you this doesn't exist, but I asked again, is there anyone here who wants to tell us something? Is there anyone here who wants to contact us? You remember I told you I didn't want you to think I was crazy. You remember that I told you at the beginning of the story that something was happening, that you were not going to believe me. I said it for the following reason, because after asking that question there was an answer, but it didn't come from the table. Here I am, a voice was heard that healed them. It was coming out of the tomb. At that moment the three of us got up with a bang, throwing the candlesticks and the board to the ground without caring, and ran out in fear towards the main road. We ran to the first fence behind the front gate, tripping over headstones and dodging crosses. When we arrived at the fence, we looked for a point where the tunes were glued together to climb. It was easier for us to find it, and the three of us jumped with full adrenaline. But it was as if something was climbing down, as if an invisible force was not letting us out. It was a heavy weight, a feeling that something terrible was about to happen. We jumped into the street without looking back. I jumped first, feeling the cold asphalt under my hands. When I fell behind, Marcos was coming, breathing hard and his eyes full of terror. And finally Juan jumped. I ran, Marcos after me, when he suddenly shouted at me to wait for me because Juan was not coming with us. We take courage and return to the Pantheon. As we approached, we saw Juan lying unconscious on the stool. He was pale and had his eyes closed as if he were sleeping very deeply. I remember my hands shaking when we called our dads. They told us to call an ambulance. They were on their way. The ambulance arrived soon with the sirens wailing. That night the civil hospital was very close to that Pantheon. With our hearts in our throats, we watched as they put Juan on a stretcher. They asked us what had happened. We simply said we were playing inside the Pantheon. We didn't want to tell what we'd heard, much less what we were doing. We thought if we were going to get into trouble, if they really knew what we were doing there, it would have been even worse. Juan fell on his head. That blow caused him to lose his temporary memory. He didn't remember anything that happened, and he didn't remember us either. His parents blamed us, so they never let us see him. Days passed, and although everything seemed to return to normal little for us, we could not forget what happened. One night I started hearing crying in the living room of my house. It was weird because I was alone. I thought maybe someone had arrived, that something bad had happened. I quickly left my room, and upon entering the living room I saw very clearly a girl standing in the middle. A girl who looks very real. It didn't look ghostly though. Her hair covered her face even though she was wearing a nightgown. Still, my first impression was that it was real, until I paid attention, until I saw that there was something very strange about it. I swear his clothes, just his clothes, seemed to float like he was underwater. I froze in panic because just seeing her brought terror. When I regained my mobility and heard that the crying was turning into laughter, I ran terrified to my room. Just as I was starting to calm down to relax a little, my cell phone rang. It was Marcos. He was very nervous. He told me he had heard something in the house. He told me that in the dark. Something very clearly. He described to me a girl hiding in her room, first crying and then making fun of him. He described her exactly as the same girl I had just seen in my house. Since then we have not stopped seeing, hearing or feeling things. First it happened to Marcos and me. Then also with my mother, who saw the girl, and then my sister also appeared. There came a point where so much was happening. Things that fell by themselves, lights that went on and off, spotlights that exploded out of nowhere, laughter, tears that we had to tell what we had done. That night we had to confess. The same thing was happening at Mark's house. His mother commented that something had come with us from the Pantheon, something that was not of this world and something that was not of this world and much less good. I don't know how she did it, but finally, my mom contacted a medium, who told us that we had not closed the portal that we opened in the Ouija board. You must say goodbye, otherwise you leave an open portal for anything to pass here. At this plane, people who are going to be permanently tied to you. She claimed that an evil spirit had followed us, that it had bonded with us and our families. He gave us amulets, and then we also told our father that he could go bless the houses. 13 years have passed since that, after the visit of the medium and the blessing of the priest. The activity waned until it almost disappeared, but we don't know if it was because of them, the amulets, or simply because we got used to living with it, ignoring the details that scare us. We didn't know more about Juan, only that he was better, and that shortly after his family moved out of the neighborhood. We believe the same thing was happening at his house, but he never spoke to us again when he recovered to this day. The only thing for sure is that our lives have never been the same since that night, since it started as a prank, with the desire to face something truly paranormal. We don't know when or how we'll be able to get rid of what stuck to us in the pantheon of what we went to look for. If my experience serves as an example so that others do not make the mistake that we made by playing with what we do not know, you will have fulfilled it. I listen to them every night, for a long time. I have heard so many stories that would once have been attributed to imagination. I like paranormal stories, but this is different. Once you've already experienced something, they feel much closer. It's like living in a horror film. Good night, community, and I deeply thank you for keeping me company by listening.